makes this? I don't know. It's me. It's Amid the Ruins. It's a guy who makes dire wave music. It's Amid the Ruins. Dire wave music. What I've talked about in, probably 100 articles at Jay's Analysis is the implementation of the AI smart grid and the giant smart cities, which is what IBM talks about publicly building. And that's where we're going, and that's what I think we have to be really concerned about. So all of these tensions, they are part of a long-term strategy to basically get everybody moved into mega cities. They'll be forced off of land and so forth for environmental reasons, and basically concocted and invented environmental nonsense. Then you'll be stuck in some hellhole mega city in a, basically a carton-size apartment living over a Target or something, or inside of a Target or a Walmart, as I said several years ago. It's actually coming true now. There's actually Target cities. This is all part of the long-term globalist strategy. So, but to get there, you've got to have the constant clash, the constant alchemical blending and mixing and smashing together right out of Manichaeanism to produce the convergence, to produce the synthesis. And that's what's crucial in all this, and what is absolutely true from an alchemical, esoteric, philosophical, and geopolitical perspective, the fact that the ruling elite seek to be post-human. jaysanalysis.com. Can't try to fix today's problems politically. And this is what so many people in alt circles and alt-right and alt-whatever and alt-media, they all seem to think that there's like a political solution to man's problems. And really the whole of modernity is built on this neo-pagan concept of political salvation. And there is no political salvation for man, because man's problems are not essentially political, they're spiritual. The hierarchy of how man views himself in the world has been inverted. I've covered over and over and over the white papers that actually discussed how to invert and subvert that, changing images of man, things like this. So what has to happen is that the inversion has to be reverted back to the way it needs to be. And that means that first and foremost for man, it is spiritual issues. Those come first. Then we have the things like the philosophy and the family and the social issues and things like that. That comes next. And race or ethnicity can be classed as part of that. That is, in other words, you caring for your people is just a broader extension of the family, the tribe, the nation. Right? It all depends on what we mean by these words and these terms. Now, America and Americanism is the first attempt at a completely propositional nation. And this is well known. This is not debated in political theory. I think even Abraham Lincoln referred to it that way. Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Jay Dyer, today's analysis. Jay Dyer, today's analysis. Jay Dyer, today's analysis. In our civilization, man has dignity because he's made in the image of God. In Plato's Athens civilization, man has no dignity. So these two grounding basic principles are fighting against one another, right? In Plato's philosophy, the state is God. It's embodied in the philosopher king. It's basically like Pharaoh type stuff, right? Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, is the opposition to that. Now, does that mean that it is egalitarian and wipes everything out? Absolutely not. There ain't a bit of egalitarianism in the last 1,960 years of Christianity. And everybody who knows anything knows that. So be honest with yourselves. Why can't you, especially liberal, lying church leaders? You people are disgusting. Thus, my point is that what all this echo chamber alternative media crap is a waste of time, is pointless. I mean, yes, it's good for waking people up, but you don't have models of how to erect civilizations. You have nothing. I'm telling you, we have an existing structure of the Orthodox Church that contains all the truths that we need to erect this great civilization. It's already been erected in the past. Now, can we go back in time and redo Byzantium? No. But we can build on what is still there, what's left, the ruins, right? Standing on the shoulders of giants, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And when you read these books, and you get an idea of civilizational studies, and you grow out of just a very naive biological racial determinism, that's not everything, man. There's more to reality, to life than race. Man has a spirit. There's obviously some aspect to which all men share manhood. Right? So does that mean that we go with the universal and we blend everybody into a giant blob of no individuals? No. That's the error of collectivism, the one in the many, dialectic. We don't do dialectics. We believe in a balance because in the triad there's a balance. In the church there's a balance. In the imperium there's a balance between the ethnos, right, and the leadership. All of this was laid out for a thousand years in the church fathers, especially the later church fathers. Look at the double. All right, welcome. What's up, nerds? Happy New Year's Eve. We're going to be talking about this more interesting than I expected film, Empty Man. It's not the greatest movie, but it was fun. Very David Lynch, although not David Lynch. So there's quite a bit of homage. Are you familiar with that famous French word, homage? Does that make me sound sophisticated? But not David Lynch. So I had a recommendation. Watch Empty Man. And I wasn't expecting to find it that interesting. But as you know, the next in our Global Elite book series is the Tim Leary Psychedelic Experience, which we kind of touched on when we talked to COTEL, our friend David Patrick Harry. But we didn't get deep into the book. We kind of focused on his research into the Far Eastern philosophical systems, which he's very studied in. So he's the expert in that. I don't know a whole lot about that realm of philosophy. I've read a few things here and there. We've read some books, had some discussions with Far Eastern minded thinkers and people, but we kind of typically take the track of argumentation, which we discussed with David, which is that the Far Eastern philosophies usually fall over into monism, dualism, pantheism, etc. So they're pretty easy to kind of box together under one overriding kind of metaphysical starting point, typically. So in that regard, there's not a whole lot really to, quote, refute from an apologetics perspective, but there are some interesting, at times, parallels and comparative religion discussions that you can have to parcel out, true and false statements here and there. And as you know, we've done the longer discussion of Father Seraphim Rose's book, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, which does deal with quite a few of these Far Eastern religions. And, he makes those same critiques that we pointed out, right? Monism, dualism. They're very useful from a social engineering perspective for the elite mindset of trying to, get everything into a global glob. The perennial philosophy, in that sense, according to the way Huxley conceives of the perennial philosophy in his book, The Perennial Philosophy. He basically says that these Far Eastern systems are very useful to global social engineering, New World Order interests, precisely because they group everybody into the giant blob. Remember the blob? Actually, like the 80s blob. The 80s B movie, The Blob, is pretty good. And in a roundabout way, you could say it's kind of making this point with Far Eastern thought. So we're going to be touching on the first half of this as we talk about what Empty Man's about. We're going to give my explanation of what the movie is about. And we're going to see a lot of parallels with, but necessary distinctions between this and Orthodox theology. St. Gregory Palamas, the uncreated light. The typical false accusation from a lot of the opponents of what we talk about is, you guys just teach yoga, right? It's just yoga. It's meditating to dissolve yourself into the one. It's Neoplatonism. It's this, it's that. None of which is actually true. Of course, the early church fathers spent many years, many of the councils, as Father Meyendorff says in his book, combating Hellenism and combating Neoplatonism. And after many centuries, you have the victory over Origenism, which is the real essential codification of a version of pseudo-Christian Neoplatonism, right? It's ultimately Platonic metaphysics wrapped up in Christian garb, and the 5th, 6th, and 7th councils pretty much eliminate that. But one area that we've not really spent a lot of time on, we did cover it when I covered Losky's dogmatic theology, is the aeon. And this is the timeless created realm. And the reason that we're interested in that is that a lot of people who do meditation, they get into the Far Eastern stuff, when they have experiences, or people who've done hallucinogens, when they have the hallucinogenic experience and they see non-material, transcendent types of things like the light that they experience, they will mistake these things, which are still in the domain of the created, the noetic realm, for God. This is what Platonism does. Platonism mistakes what we would say is the created aeon, the noetic realm, where we would place a lot of the created geometrical forms, the angelic abode, you could say, the noetic realm. It's non-material, right? It's noetic. They're called the noetic powers, the angels. The noosphere, which will actually come up in the book, or in the movie Empty Man. People mistake that for God, right? And this is how, for example, Paul can say Satan can appear as an angel of light and deceive people because Oh, well, I had a spiritual experience. It must be good, therefore. Really? Maybe you had a demonic spiritual experience, right? Just because you felt good, right? You can't make subjective states of feeling good or whatever, pleasures. That's not necessarily of God, per se. And a lot of these experiences, of course, are accompanied by terrors, right? Horrible experiences. I had a bad trip the first time I did acid, and we've covered that many, many years ago. I don't do anything like that anymore, but back when I was in high school, I had the bad trip. We've covered that, Martin Landau's face melting and all that. Fun stories that were hellacious at the time. But we're going to see how we don't want to get into the delusion. And this is the main warning here, is that these kinds of things, right, they're not totally wrong in the sense of, oh, you never had that experience, or you didn't have a spiritual experience. No, you probably had a spiritual experience, but that doesn't mean it was a good spiritual experience, or that it was of God, right? So discernment is the key here. How do we discern between a vision, an experience of the beyond, of the transcendent, of whatever, from being from God, from ourselves, or perhaps from the angelic realm? And from the angelic realm could conceivably be evil or good, right? So we can't operate with that basic bitch level understanding that anything that's a spiritual experience is therefore good, right? This is the typical kind of New Age attitude, right? It doesn't make any sense. That will all be very interesting when we get into this book. I'm halfway through the book now, so I have a little bit better context to deal with this. But when we talked to COTEL about all this, he agreed, right? And he is finishing his PhD in these topics. Now, the introduction in this book is Daniel Pinchbeck. Now, I was invited on a few streams, I think, that he's been on, but I never did take that up. Maybe I should have. I don't know. I don't know Daniel Pinchbeck. I've never talked to him, but I don't really think he would be a huge fan of Jay's analysis, but I don't know. Maybe he would be. Welcome, everybody, by the way. Yes, the devil, as Father Deacon Dr. Ananias says, I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. The classic phrase of the devil. You can, of course, support with super chats. Anybody who wants to. Let me get my little handy super chats now, our course through Streamlabs. And that has been a good thing, by the way. So even though we are demonetized, we have done well for the last 6 months, 5 super chats. By the way, thank you, everybody, to the Richard Grove stream. We passed 100,000 views. I haven't had a video past 100,000 views in a long time. Somehow the algorithm decided that they liked that one. So thank you to Saint Algorithm for interceding for us directly to the Zucker Lords in allowing that video to go through. So it's had over 100,000 views. And this week we gained, I think in the last week, 2 weeks, 4,000 YouTube subscribers. We haven't had that. That's been the greatest 2 weeks I've ever had on YouTube. The last 2 weeks, I've never gained 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers in 2 weeks. So we are almost at a new pinnacle, 70 and then 75K. We're going to have, of course, I don't know what party we'll have. We may wait till 75. We may do a party at 70K. I don't know. But, on our way, hopefully, one day to 100. That's always been the goal, is to at least hit 100K. I feel like we should already be beyond that, but, whatever. We are at the behest of our Zucker Lords now. And so that you have like the Zucker Lord, and then you have the demiurge algorithm that controls and rules you, right? The evil demiurge algorithm that you must pay obeisance to. How do you like my Buddhist chant? Now, as you know, Tibetan Buddhism, again, this is not my arena, but everything I know about Tibetan Buddhism I learned from Twin Peaks, The Golden Child, and Empty Man. Tibetan Buddhism is a combination of the philosophic Buddhism with the indigenous older religion. of the Himalayan blah 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 region. So it has a weird kind of syncretic thing of this philosophical strands of Buddhism proper, and then the indigenous animistic gods and demons worldview. So it's an interesting mix. It is, as you know, the entire basis of many David Lynch movies, but really Twin Peaks. As you know, tulpas. Right? If you're a big Twin Peaks fan, you know the tulpas play a big role in Twin Peaks, especially the new season with Dougie. Dougie was a tulpa. But in the movie, let's get into this movie, and then we'll move into Leary's psychedelic experience. It's 1995, and these... by the way, that was in the period when Free Tibet, all this Tibet, blah, blah, blah nonsense was everywhere. That was a CIA-aided operation. The Free Tibet was basically a creation, a kind of a cutout. You can look that up in terms of the LA Times has an article on it. New York Times. The Dalai Lama has kind of been, either an asset or friendly to the CIA for a long time. And it's pretty obvious why. You could see why that would be the case. That doesn't make the Chinese versus Tibet. I'm not taking a side there. I don't really... This is in the realm of geopolitics. And so that's really beyond question. Ingdahl has a whole chapter on Dalai Lama and Free Tibet. That was a thing in the 90s. I was in the 90s. Were you in the 90s? I was. And in the 90s... there was Free Tibet, right? MTV used to promote Free Tibet. And if you recall, Twin Peaks, Agent Dale Cooper, for whatever reason, he's all obsessed with Free Tibet. Okay, so this was a kind of a color revolution theory. If I remember in Ingdahl's chapter, he characterizes it as in this overall model of color revolutions. And it had, a larger geopolitical game to play. It has nothing really to do with freeing Tibet. It has everything to do with, the East-West geopolitics stuff. And so it makes sense why in 1995 you have this team of people going up into Bhutan and basically they... And yes, if you've not seen the movie, I'm going to, kind of give you my analysis. So be prepared. Thank you for those super chats. We'll get to those in a minute. So you got this team of, 20-somethings, Nirvana fans, going up into Bhutan. They're hiking way up into these mountains. They cross a bridge. So the beginning of the movie is the crossing of the bridge. The bridge will come up many, many times in the film. It's a key symbol. And it just symbolizes, I believe, the passage, the bridge from this world to the next. Okay? Here and there. And so they're hiking over this bridge. It's got all the little, Tibetan little, trinkets hanging around the bridge or whatever. They love all those little trinkets and shit hanging from stuff. And one of the unfortunate cool dudes falls down a hole. He falls down it looks like a well, but he just falls down this hole, and there's a bone. Excuse me, I forgot the bone flute. Okay, this is not a crude sex joke, although it was difficult not to make crude sex jokes when they blow the bone flute. But the dude blows the bone flute, just kind of like this thing he found, I guess, on the ground, or they picked up at some market, right? You always pick up like the most cursed item at like a Tijuana flea market or some shit, right? Like it's like, oh crap, I just got, Satan's flute, literally at the market. Sucks to be me, right? And so he blows this bone flute, and the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking of doo 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 doo. I was waiting for the little, right? Zelda. Hello, Zelda. And by the way, did you know the flute in Mario is the same sound as the flute in Zelda? The idea of playing the flute, the pan flute, Pan, who is Pan? Was the devil, of course, right? So what does this mean? Well, there is in some of these Far Eastern religions, actually put it in one of my analyses in the book. I've already forgot. It may not be in the book. It's my Mad Max analysis. I was reading about Far Eastern things, and there is this notion. What is the name of that word? What is that word? The name of the word. It's the whole idea why they chant. Okay, so when you're chanting or when you're singing, it's a sound vibration that's intended to evoke a plane of existence, one of the like celestial spheres. This goes back to the idea that the celestial spheres are playing a tune, a note. This is why, by the way, in Twin Peaks you have the record player that's playing the universe. Right? It's playing the universe in season 3. Anyway, there's a name for this, which is why they chant certain intonations to basically harmonize with a level of vibrational frequencies. Right? Yeah, all these New Agers talk about it, but there's something probably true. I think there's truth to this, right? Different layers of reality, planes of existence do relate to, I think, different notes and sounds. If you've read the Narnia story, then you know in Magician's nephew, Aslan sings creation into existence. I don't know how all that works, but this is an old idea. Right? It goes back to the ancient world. I think there's something to this. And so this seems to be retained in some way in these Tibetan notions. So when you're doing these, or you're trying to like harmonize your frequency with their frequencies, man, this kind of a thing. And if you do, in I think Hinduism, they have the notion that there is a God form, right? So when you achieve, this is the same principle behind why they do the different patterns when they do yoga, is they're trying to invoke a God form. Roughly the same idea here. Probably people in the audience can remember this term that I can't think of. But so he plays the bone flute. Oh, sucks to be you, dude, because you just played Satan's bone flute. Okay, this is the worst possible flute that you could ever get a hold of and hoot with. And they don't even play it; they just hoot, don't they? Mm-hmm. Hoot. Right? So you play the bone flute, you're gonna lose your soul, and that's what happens here. Thank you. Yeah. Where are we at? Okay, so the dude falls down in this pit, right? So he's accidentally played the worst flute ever. He does it, falls down this pit. He's kind of led off into the distance in a trance after playing the flute. And when he falls down there, it's just this little cave with like this bizarre spider skeleton thing, right? So there's like a dead skeleton thing. And you notice that it is, the hands of this thing are like this, okay? This will be throughout the film. Okay, every time somebody picks up a flute or a bottle to blow, they hold it like such. Okay, and this is everywhere, and this is on purpose because this is, well, first of all, it's a skeleton, right? So it's death. What is death? Death is a kind of moving into non-being, right? I'm not saying when you die you literally become non-being, but I'm saying there's a connection between death and privation and non-being or non-existence. That will play heavily into this film, its symbolism, and the empty man. Who is the empty man? Ultimately we'll see, but when you're emptied out, you become a vessel. But this movie's about possession, ultimately. Okay, so shocker, you probably figured that out already, but that's where we're going, and it's going to be abundantly clear as we get into the third act. However, I'll say before we move on, one thing I didn't expect about this movie is if you watch the trailer, you think you're going to watch some teenage kind of like Final Destination crap, right? Like I'm expecting this to be Final Destination, and that's not what this trailer is very misleading, okay? It's not a Final Destination movie. I don't know what, we're not seeing the people's super chats aren't popping up. That's okay. I mean, I can see the super chats. We're going to read them in a minute, but for some reason the little zombie guy is behind my picture, and I don't know how to get him back on top. So we'll have to do that later. But I can see everybody's super chats. I'll be reading them in a minute. Plus that zombie's annoying anyway. We don't need him anyway. Screw that zombie. Screw that zombie to heck. I don't know why everybody thinks that I come on here and I'm like on something. I don't drink. The weed that we smoked this week was the non-THC weed. I met up with my godfather and we went to that goofy hemp store and I got that non-THC hemp that doesn't do it. That gets you really sober, man. we coming down, man. We coming really down. So no, this is the actual me. You know what I'm on right now? Straight up espresso, dude. That's what I'm on. That is a damn fine cup of Joe. Agent Cooper, I can hear. It's a miracle. Thank you. Much appreciated. Love those fat super chats. Awesome. Awesome. Rolling in. Look at that. Wow, you guys are really cool. I do drink. Correct. I drink coffee. I don't like alcohol anymore at all. I don't look down on anyone that loves alcohol. Plenty of people do, but it just does not. My body does not jive with alcohol anymore. This is the real me. It's pure Spurg power. Don't you understand? And even if I didn't have coffee, I could pull from these Spurg energies and it wouldn't even be a thing. It would just be straight up real, raw Spurg energy, dude. This movie is like 3 different movies. That's the weird part of this movie, I think. And maybe this is why it's not... I don't think the critics were big fans of this movie. Because it's almost like Act 1 is one kind of movie. The second act is like Final Destination teens invoking some... if you stand in the mirror and turn around in circles and pick your nose and scream for Bitchy Mary, Bloody Mary shows up and bitches you out, or whatever that stupid thing is. The second act of the movie is like that. So the first part is like Tibetan Buddha demon thing, and then it turns into teens invoking Bloody Mary, and then it turns into a cult, a crazy global cult that's bringing in the end of the world. So it's like, I think maybe people were confused by 3 different movies at once in one movie. But that is, I think, the most odd part of it. It doesn't really bother me. I always like movies that kind of just go crazy, right? Like you think you're watching one thing and then an hour later we're like off in some other dimension. Like I like that kind of stuff. So that's what we have here. But let's get back to Act 1 with people, the Nirvana fans in the Bhutan in 1995. So we're up there hanging out. The guy's possessed. People are starting to freak out. And then because we got this big H.R. Giger looking entity skeleton thing that is just entranced the dude bro, right? So the dude bro's like, he's down there and he's like, whoa. And then he's frozen. And he's frozen in this meditative posture. And he like he can't talk. So the buddies wander over there and the chicks and they find the guy and they're like, oh, what do we do? Oh, dude, what's up? So they can't get him out of this trance, right? They pick him out, carry him off to this little hut that they found, basically. They stash their dude bro in the hut, and then they decide, well, we got to go walk, miles to the nearest phone or a hospital or whatever, because they're up in the mountains. Remember, in the 1990s, nobody had cell phones. A much better world before cell phones. And so, eventually, as you can imagine, as always happens in horror films, the initial people who set out to find help are gone. This leaves, one by one, the friends have to leave. So this leaves one girl, eventually, left in the cabin, and she eventually falls asleep. And our possessed creeper dude in the spirit world seems to come to her in a dream and get over her ear and do the whisper thing. And if you remember in Isaiah, right, the whispers, the mutterers, right, they speak to the spirit realm. So what we're beginning to see here is that, okay, so things are happening kind of in the spiritual realm, influencing, right, the physical realm. Clearly this dude seems to be possessed. The girl there thinks that her friends are coming. She's watching out the window, and she sees this dark black figure in the snow, approaching the cabin, the hut or whatever. So she goes outside. Oh, hey, help! We need help. And no, this is an empty thing, like a husk. Okay, this is a demon creature in tattered rags running at her. And of course, she shuts the door, freaks out, and waits. And knock, knock, knock. Her friends are there, and you're freaking out, right? There's no demon creatures. Their friend is freaking possessed. You would think they would be a little more open to the possibility of demon entities attacking, but regardless. They brush it off and, okay, well, we got to, get him to the hospital somehow, blah, blah, blah. And this doesn't happen, right? So the next thing that occurs, the chick loses it. She stabs the friends, pushes them off the cliff, and then throws herself off the cliff. And then we don't know what happens. Fast forward to now, right? So then we fast forward to 2018 in Missouri. But one thing that's interesting is that the sequences of the events in Bhutan were day 1, day 2, and day 3. So there's this superstitious Bloody Mary element to it, where the first day you hear Empty Man, then the second day you see Empty Man. The third day he touches you and you die. So this is the final destination superstition thing that goes along with it, and that's why the first act is structured in 1, 2, 3, roughly the first act, first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie. We don't really know what's happened to the guy that's possessed. He doesn't get killed. He's the only one somehow that doesn't make it. Or excuse me, that doesn't get killed. All the other, Free Tibet, cool teen people or millennial, they're not millennials, it's the 90s, but that age group, right, the 20s. Cool 20-somethings, they're all dead. But notice the inversion. 3 days and 3 nights. Right? Where does this come up? The resurrection. Right? Obviously, Christ, 3 days, 3 nights. Very important. This threefold structure will be, number one, the movie has a threefold structure. And then at the end, we'll have an explanation as to what this means. But I'm going to go ahead and take it to be an inversion of the 3 days as they relate to Christ's death, burial, resurrection. Now, already we kind of see, by the way, a lot of nods to David Lynch with the camera effects, with the Tibetan stuff, the tulpas and so forth. But so here we are. It's 2018. We're in Missouri, and we've got this dude. We don't know who this dude is, but he's just a kind of a normal dude, ex-cop, ex-investigator who owns a like a little security store. And by that I mean like a gun shop with, tasers and pepper spray, this kind of a thing. And he's jogging across a bridge, right? A bad sign right away for this poor dude. We see him the next day. He's alone, single. Right? Apparently doesn't have a family. Something happened. His wife and son are missing or gone. We suspect. This comes up later, but it's his birthday. This will be significant later in the film. He's alone at the Mexican restaurant. Happy birthday. Here's your flan. By the way, worst dessert ever. Right? Especially you're single, alone on your birthday, and you're eating flan. Give up, dude. Life's over. Flan is literally the worst dessert of all time. It's like cooked cheesecake custard. It's like, why did you mess up my cheesecake, dude? Like, my cheesecake was fine, and you turned it into its gay cousin, flan.
Oh, hi, I'm Flan. I'm the cousin of cheesecake that no one likes.
This kind of a thing. Get that flan out of here, boy. Okay, so then this poor character, the detective, I forget what his name is. This poor guy's kind of, hanging out alone, and this girl with the 80s bowl cut penis shaped hairdo shows up. Right, literally, the boy's bowl cut that's shaped like a penis thing. This weird new agey chick shows up, and they know each other, and she's like, "Oh, I just wanted to come check on you after the bad events. I'm worried about you. I want to make sure you're okay." Blah blah blah. And I found the meaning of all reality, she says, and it's at the Pontifex Institute. Now, this is where it starts to get a little weird. So here we have the introduction of the cult that's involved in all this, that will be called the Pontifex Institute. She says, they taught me the secrets of reality, the metaphysical secrets of all things. Our world is a projection of your psyche. Oh, whoa, right? Like everything that we think, we can manifest that, right? And the world that we see is intentional manifestation. Typical kind of Far Eastern Carl Jung gibberish. She tells this to our main guy. He says, yeah, okay, whatever you say. And then we find out that he has a relationship to her mom, this teenage girl, and that this in some way relates to a missing person death thing. I'm trying to remember all the details. Our main character is on pills. I don't exactly know what. I mean, like a SSRI type of pill. I'm not sure, because he does eventually stop taking them. I'm not exactly sure what that means. So, you guys feel free to tell me why you think, if you've seen the movie, him taking the SSRIs and then not taking them is significant. I wasn't sure what to make of that, but we hear about a murder that's occurred. And we are told the empty man made me do it. So there was a murder. There's another murder that comes up, a missing person. And in one of the murders, there was, because this ex-cop character knows police chief, right? Angry black police chief. There's always one of those, right? Here he is. A woman murdered her children. I forget how. Killed them and wrote in blood, empty man made me do it. Okay, so ritual crime, we think, perhaps. Then we find out that an inquiry is being made into missing teen. There's a missing teen, the daughter that the guy was friendly with, of his lover. She's gone missing. He's out looking for her. So he goes to her friends. Right? She's got this crew of, Zoomers. So he goes and he quizzes the Zoomers. And says, what happened? Why did you guys, where's she at? What happened? The Zoomers are freaked out because they tell of this story of being on the bridge in town, hooting into the bottles and calling forth empty men. Of course, ha ha ha, this makes no sense. This is absurd. There's no empty man. What are you talking about? This is, urban legend type stuff. By the way, I should add that the symbolism associated with the Pontifex Institute, pyramid, obviously, right? Illuminate, confirm. Dragonfly, and I think butterfly. It's either a dragonfly or butterfly, but maybe both. So we already kind of have some indicators as to where we're going with this. So she tells the story that we were all chilling on the bridge, drinking beers, smoking cigarettes like teenagers do, and we got to talking about evocation, right? Summoning entities. Oh, we can summon. Ha ha ha! This is stupid. You can't summon the empty man through hooting into a beer bottle. Turns out you can. So beware bone flutes and hooting into bottles. Because you will summon the empty man and kill a dog for his blood. I don't know what that means. Anyway, long story short, our detective character finds out that the teens are being killed one by one. The girl who tells him the story of what they did, summoning empty man, eventually ends up dead. Of course, killed by the empty man. And written in blood at the sauna where she was, empty man made me do it. when he finds the other teens hanging under the bridge, it also says, the empty man made me do it. So then he remembers that the girl, the penis bowl cut girl, told him to look into Pontifex Institute, the philosophy, the idea of tulpas. Right? So he's been told this stuff, and he's like, what is all this stuff? This is crazy. So he starts doing his, internet research, as every conspiracy person in a movie does. Remember, if you remember, like, oh, what are wolves or werewolves? What are vampires? Or they Google vampires and they find a GeoCities website that like tells you what a vampire is. Like who doesn't know what that is, right?
What is a witch? I will look on Wikipedia. Witch. Oh.
He looks up tulpas. He looks up thought forms. Now it's getting interesting, because the tulpa is the thought form that's created by intentionality, right, of the shaman or the group of initiates to bring to manifestation this thing out of the realm of pure potentia. That's going to be important for later on. And so he's Googling around. Oh, yes, the Pontifex Institute, this cult did a famous, quote, occult experiment on a group of people long ago, right? So we kind of have like references to Heaven's Gate, the experiment that they did is very reminiscent of Heaven's Gate. It's reminiscent of Scientology, this cult, and it's reminiscent of Osho. So go listen to the talk that Tristan and I did on the Osho documentary, which is a really good documentary. Go listen to the show that Tristan and I did on Jacob's Ladder, because this book is essentially the influence of Jacob's Ladder. And I'm going to show you the Adrian Lin article, or well, it's not Adrian Lin, but an interview where Adrian Lin talks about being influenced by this stuff. Tim Leary, he had a friend who was close to Tim Leary, got them acid and stuff. So he says, yes, the Tibetan Book of the Dead experience is what you get with Jacob's Ladder. So there's going to be a lot of similarities to this movie, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Jacob's Ladder. All right, so also, if you look into... Okay, so he goes to the local Pontifex Institute cult building, right? By the way, it looks like a Masonic lodge when he gets there. He goes in, he says, I'm here to kind of just research, see what you guys are all about. There's this really creepy girl who's the greeter, and she's like, oh, welcome, we will solve all your problems. Just have a seat, right? It's played up very well. I like the way they did this. By the way, zone theory, if you've seen the Tim and Eric skit, zone theory. If you've seen the zone theory skit, it's like that. If you've seen the Phoenix, the Sphinx in Mystery Men, this is like a mix of all those. So he goes in, he sits down, and he listens to the local cult leader give a sermon. This is a very fascinating sermon, because it's kind of a piecemeal cafeteria style approach to what most cults do when they take from all of these Far Eastern religions and blend it into this new made up cult, right? They're like, we can solve all your problems because the problem is within you, right? What are some of the Sphinx's isms, right? Like, in order to, I'll have to look them up, but you know what the Sphinx does in Mystery Men, right? Like, he just says, he who must do this must not do that, right? Just pure nonsense, empty, elastic statements that could be interpreted to mean anything, right? And so basically the cult leader says, worship yourself, get rid of your possessions. Oh yeah, the cult leader always wants you to get rid of your possessions, right? And probably donate them to the cult, of course. And then you will realize that you are all, right? So you get this monism, this pantheism, this dissolution of the self. Oh, now it's starting to make sense. Empty man. Empty man. you become this vessel. Now the movie is getting more interesting. Non-being. So it actually starts to verge into some kind of basic philosophical concepts about ontology, metaphysics, being. And the guy is kind of transfixed by this, and the main guy, and says, well, this is really interesting. But he's like, I grew up in San Francisco, he says. He says this multiple times, by the way, which is a key later on in the film. He says, and so I saw all this kind of new agey stuff in the, 80s, 90s, so forth. He's like, so this isn't new to me. I've heard this kind of nonsense, but he's like, what's going on here is something different. And he says, because in your sermon, you mentioned the empty man. And the cult leader says, yes, the empty man. He beckons to you. He speaks to you, doesn't he? Right? And so we kind of are immediately presented with this contradiction. How can an entity that's empty, right, or an empty man, a non-entity, non-being entity, speak to you? How can he get into your mind? This kind of stuff. And so the guy's like, okay, whatever. This sounds interesting. But so he kind of acts like he's leaving, but he sneaks around into the basement. Now this is where it gets weird, because he goes into the cult's basement. He walks through this giant big complex they've got, and he finds a bunch of beds where people, I guess, live at the compound. And the awake initiates being initiated are gathered around a poster of pure blackness on the wall. Empty, non-being, right? So it's not literally a portal, but it's as if this poster is kind of supposed to be this doorway to the void, the abyss. It's exactly what the cult leader says in his sermon. He says, the abyss, right? We've all heard this overused cliche phrase from Nietzsche: when you stare into the abyss stares back into you. Well, guess what? Maybe the abyss is actually a metaphysically real place, the void. Well, if you know your Bible, you know the abyss is real. Absolutely. Jesus says, of course, that in the eschaton, when Satan is ended in his existence, in his reign, he will be banished. He will be thrown out, lake of fire, all those things, to the outer darkness. He says those that follow Satan will also be banished with him into that outer darkness. This is the same place. It's the abyss, the void. He listens. So here's where it starts to get more and more creepy. So he's sneaking around, and he notices that the people who are being initiated are listening to a tape of one of the cult's audio tapes, and the tape is saying, there is no thing, everything is no thing, reality is no thing. If reality is no thing, then things are not things, right? So ultimately, it's saying everything is no thing, right? Non-being is the real being. And that's going to tie directly into this, because guess what these satanic people say? Since all things come from no thing, the Big Bang, then you must return to non-being. Ego, death, self-dissolution, and destruction. What could be more satanic than this? I mean, really? Wow. Okay. So the reasoning is that because of the Big Bang, this is chapter 1 in this book, there's some ontological primacy to when all things were compacted into this, super mass where all the galaxies and all matter. By the way, this is all bullshit. Okay. It's total absurdity. All of reality was compacted into a single atom that exploded. What? Yeah. I mean, it's just total absurdity, right? This is the secular creation myth, which no one has observed. Absolutely no empirical evidence for this. 100% a fantasy not invented by modern science. It actually goes back to these ancient pagan religions. Yes, they taught. There's a whole chapter. Chapter 1 is about that the Big Bang is an ancient animistic pagan conception, just dressed up in scientism garbage to fool people who don't even know that they're making metaphysical claims and arguments and think they're being scientific. It literally had nothing to do with science whatsoever. Absolutely no scientific basis for the empirical data of what happened 1 billion years ago. Really? Pure science fiction, pure mythology. There you go. Anyway, let's set that aside, though, because our protagonist is wandering through the cult compound. He sees, again, things very reminiscent of Scientology mixed with Osho, mixed with Heaven's Gate. And he keeps wandering, and he finds another stairway down deeper. Right, so he's going deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're finding out that, yes, as you can imagine, there's an analogy between the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, going down deeper into the subconscious, into these kind of, down into the abyss, to this primal region. And so as he goes deeper down in the cult compound, he finds more and more bizarre things. So he finds another level where down there, there's a giant open area, and they're doing a seance. Essentially, some kind of seance, right? And he's really just weirded out because it's like, what are they? They're all sort of in this circle. They're trying to evoke the empty man or this person, and they all hoot into their bottles, right, to call forth whoever they're calling forth, empty man. Now he's sneaking around, and he accidentally, of course, bumps something, and he startles everyone, and then he runs off. And as he runs out of there, he meets this teenage guy that he saw in the cult meeting, who's a new member of this cult. And the teenage guy's acting really weird, and he's like, "Yeah, well, maybe you'll find your answers if you go to the cult's retreat out in Mark Twain Park, someplace. I don't know where this is. I guess it's in Missouri. I don't know." So he's like, "Yeah, go out to the cult's retreat way out in the country." All right. So the guy's like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to keep doing my detective work." And so he realizes that when he looked up the occult experiment, that it was at this camp. Who would want to go to cult camp? Not me. It's the last place, like the total nightmare, right? Like imagine going to cult camp. It just screams like mind control. And this is where it's starting to get a little more interesting in terms of mind control, right? So now we see that, so this cult is actually brainwashing people. They're actually making people into perhaps empty men to become vessels. Eventually the girl, the bowl cut, penis haircut girl will say, our whole plan is to be vessels for the signal, right? She says, empty man puts out a signal. We are the receivers, the antenna for this signal. Now, this is very interesting for the spiritual realm, because that's kind of accurate in the sense that what you tune yourself into in terms of your life and your worldview and your choices, and whether you want to follow, God's law and this kind of stuff, or your own passions and let them run your life. You're tuning yourself into different frequencies, and the frequency, so to speak, that you tune into will influence your perception of the world, your worldview. And they can either be evil or they can be God, right? There's no middle ground here. Like you're going in one of those two directions, right, with your life. So our dude goes out to the camp cult compound. Now, just in terms of the movie, this is one of the best sequences, because this is where it gets legitimately interesting and creepy. So he's out there at this cult compound, he's researching, and nobody's there because it was they had a bad experience many years ago at this cult as he was reading the news articles, and so they had to abandon this campground. You think it's abandoned, right? So he's going through these different cabins at the compound. It's all vacated. And he finds a VHS tape and these weird kind of blood smears on the wall that someone has turned into a kind of a painting. And so he watches this VHS tape, and he realizes that the perhaps the occult experiment that went bad at this cult cabin compound was successful. This made me think of the CIA's research into occult phenomena, SRI, remote viewing, astral projection, this kind of stuff. That's all real. That's all been, just look it up. Plenty of mainstream news articles that talk about the CIA doing that. They've declassified their claims, at least, that they had success with remote viewing and astral projection. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, again, the whole LSD experience and its modern codification is out of the CIA. Beyond any dispute. Go look up Tim Leary's quote where he says, you can thank the CIA for the entire 60s counterculture revolution and LSD. They didn't invent it, but I'm saying the counterculture. Right? They bequeathed the LSD experience to everyone and then steered the counterculture. That's what Tim Leary is talking about. By the way, and I've read 5 books on this. I'm not just making that up. I'm from them. Okay, from them. Where are we at? So he's out the car. The weird stuff starts happening. Teddy bears start moving. That was weird. Not sure what that's supposed to mean. But basically what we learn from this is that our dude is having a hard time like figuring out reality from non-reality. So while he's doing this and starting to pick up on the clues of what the cult's actually up to, he starts hearing this chanting. This is the best creepy part of the movie. He walks out into the woods and he sees this other camp area where a mass of people is marching in a circle around a giant bonfire. And they're chanting, I forget what they're chanting, but a very, very good creepy movie image. And the flame does a pillar of fire. Again, the use of biblical imagery. We know that the Israelites were protected via the cloud and the flame in the Exodus narrative. This is all the inverse of what you have in the biblical story, right? So God is good. God is the source of being. As Dionysius says, being is one of God's energies. And so God created out of his own overflowing goodness. So being is good. Created being is good. The created being that is good is participatory in different modes and in different ways in God's goodness. Right? This is common argument in St. Maximus and many of the church fathers. And so non-being is an intentional kind of move away from the good if you're a being that exists, right? So if I'm an existing being with a will and I move away from the good in the sense of not wanting to be good, not wanting to follow the good, that is what evil is for us as Orthodox, right? So we don't give evil any substantial ontological being or existence. So evil it's used in different senses, but in one sense it's a privation of the good. Right? It's a lack. You could use an analogy of negative numbers. Right? Do negative numbers exist? Yes and no. Right? Does evil exist? Not in a metaphysical way, but in the sense that beings endowed with a good, rational nature can do things against the good. In that sense, evil does exist. And so non-being, while not in itself evil, the intentional move to get rid of beings or to kill life is evil. And in this way, many Satanists, many people who are consciously interested in the left-hand path and this kind of stuff, they will be fairly vocal about the desire to have non-being, to move away. Nihilism. Remember what Father Seraphim Rose says in his book Nihilism. He talks about the stages of rebellion against God, right? And that final stage is nihilism for the sake of nihilism, just pure chaotic destruction. To destroy being itself, because being existence is good. And these Far Eastern religions are ultimately highly duped because they think that they have enlightenment in their desire to destroy or dissolve existence, identity, self, etc. itself. You see. So the fundamental opposition that we have with these kinds of religions is at a basic metaphysical level about reality and existence. For us, this world is good because it is created by God. God said it is good. For the other religions, most of the world religions, generally speaking, this world is conceived of as the source of evil. It is a prison, right? Gnostic types of ideas, right? Platonism, to be escaped from. Two radically different views here. And that's what we're beginning to see with our main character, is that there is an invasion of the empty, the nothing. Ever seen The Never-Ending Story? Look around. See. Right, this kind of stuff. What's the bad guy in that? The nothing. By the way, that was Michael Enda's book is influenced by Crowley, by the way. That's a very esoteric story, Never-Ending Story. Very high-level Gnostic, satanic stuff there. For kids, if you didn't know. Bastian is Moonchild in the movie. Watch the subtitles. It tells you that. And by the way, in the Never-Ending Story, the nothing is the abyss that is taking over the realm of imagination, you see. Now, one thing I will say too, for us as Orthodox, we don't make non-being itself an evil, okay? I said it's an evil in the sense of a privation, but not having being itself is not evil. Intentionally trying to destroy being against the goodness of God is evil, okay? But something that's only existing in potentia, for example, is not evil, right? Because it has non-being. God did not actualize every one of the logi that he knows or possesses. God's mind's infinite, right? He could have created all kinds of logically possible worlds, but he only created this one. So the ones that he did not create, which are real potentia, they're not inherently evil because they don't have actualized existence. That's silly. That would mean that there's evil in God's mind because he didn't actualize them. That's stupid. So in this regard, what we say about evil is that moral evil, which is the real meaning of evil here, is not merely metaphysical per se, but it is actually ethical. And so in that regard, it has to be something personal. It requires a living agent or being to do something evil. This is where we get fallen angels and humans who commit immoral, evil actions. And that is really what we mean when we're talking about evil. So for us, human beings are not the only source of evil. In fact, human beings are not the original source of evil. Prior to Adam's fall, there was a rebellion amongst the angelic realm. And we're told in the Apocalypse that 1/3 of the angels, in their period of testing, fell. They went into rebellion with Satan. Now, we don't know all the details of this. We're not told every single, mechanics of how this all went down, but we just know that it went down. And in our tradition, we do have there are arenas in which we can know some things about this realm, so to speak, and what happened. And if you want to go deeper into that, you could listen to the talk that I did on Lossky's Dogmatic Theology, wherein there is a chapter on the angelic realm, the fall of the angels, and the aeon, the timeless aeon. And I want to mention a little bit about this because in terms of modern Orthodox theologians, Lossky has the best summary of what the aeon is, why it matters. in an easy, digestible way. If you want to read Staniloy's 60 or 70 or 80 pages about this and the aeon and time, very difficult. It will be very hard if you're not into this stuff or new to philosophy or theology or whatever. But Lossky's chapter is a lot more digestible, and he's really just summarizing the philosophy of St. Maximus, who wrote at length on this topic. And John Damascus mentions it, for example, in the Defense of the Orthodox Faith. And it's one of the key ways that we're not Platonists, you see. So Platonism, for example, amongst its many dialectical tensions, one is time versus eternity. In Platonism, eternal is good because it's being, it is one, it is monad, contrasted against the many. The many is on a lower ontological status or plane, and so is time. Time is a prison, time is a thing to get away from and escape from, and it's just bad. It sucks, right? It gives rise to flux, to change, to decay. So obviously time in Platonism can't be what we're shooting for. Orthodoxy does not see time as evil, nor does it equate eternity with God. Now that might sound a little surprising to you. Wait a minute, I thought God alone is eternal. The eternality that God possesses is not equivalent to every eternity. There is a timeless created eternity known as the aeon, and it is not evil, but it is not identical to God. I'm not going to read this whole chapter. I'm going to read this one section that will give you an introduction. We're not going to deal with all of this today. But if you've read, for example, I think it's the Guru, Young Man, Elder, right? And Father Seraphim Rose makes this same point in Orthodoxy Religion of the Future. Both of these books make the point that the other religions, when they go into their meditative states, when the shaman is experiencing that other realm, or when the drug practitioner is experiencing the light of this other realm, which we're going to see in chapter 1 of the Leary book, this is not to be confused with God. There is a created noetic realm that includes these thought forms, that includes these potentia, that includes the bodiless powers, the noetic powers, the angels, and the souls of men. This is still the created realm, and this confuses people. By the way, it's also the location, you could say, of the geometric forms of mathematical principles. This timeless, intelligible, created aeon is not identical to God or the uncreated energies. But because it is a noetic reality and experience, it fools the people who experience it into thinking it is God. And that the entities that they've experienced there are God or are divine. They're not. Angels, demons, souls of men. That's the noetic realm. And other objective realities or potentias, thought forms, etc. Let me give you an example. When you go to sleep and you have a dream, where is that? And you could say, oh, it's just in here and chemical reactions. Really? You sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure that even though it's a dream, there's still a logic and a meaning to that experience that's not physical. So the meaning and the experience of the events in the dream state, even though they're not real in the sense of this world, they're still meaningful and real in another sense, or else you couldn't talk about it or explain it or have the experience. So where is that? And by the way, remember, if you're a materialist, you're not going to be able to explain this by just literally reducing it to brain states, because those brain states are not equated to the meaning of the descriptors of the dream. Any more than a sentence is reducible to any sentence. Any word, any phrase cannot be reducible to brain states or neurons. Obviously, this is so self-evident. that it shouldn't even have to be debated. So what's going on here? Well, dreams, I would say, represent the inner man. It's the inner noetic realm that's very real. It's not real in the same way that the physical world outside you is real, but it is your inner world, and it is real. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that happens in the dream is from the same source. You could have a dream that's coming from your subconscious, from you. God could give you a dream. An angel or a demon could give you a dream. Okay, so I'm not trying to be overly simplistic. I'm just saying that dreams are an example, and I think Athanasius uses dreams as an example to show that the human is not purely matter, right? In fact, he even argues, I think it's in Ad Gentes, he argues that the dream is an example of the soul continuing on after the existence of the body, goes when the body dies, right? And he says dreams are a proof of this, that we continue to live on in a noetic sense. So that's just one example, right? So, and do we know all the mechanics of all this? No, I don't claim to know this. I don't think anybody does. We have theologians and elders and philosophers and saints who have talked a lot about it. And so we can really kind of only give a rough kind of sketch or outline of how the inner world interacts with these higher realms and so forth. But I really appreciate what Losky says here, and listen to what he says, which makes my point. One should avoid the categories of time when we evoke eternity. If the Bible uses these categories nonetheless, it is rather to emphasize, by means of a rich symbolism, the positive attitude towards time, positivity of time, where the encounters of God and human beings mature its ontological autonomy as an adventure of human freedom and its possibility of transfiguration. He's just saying that time is not evil for us. It's a temporary, you could say, place of testing, the temporal realm, this world. The fathers of the church sensed this very well, and they were very careful not to define eternity as an opposition to time. If the categories of time are movement, change, and passage from one state into another, you cannot contrast these word for word with immobility, immutability, and invariability of some static eternity. Okay, this is one of the errors of Origen and Platonism. Origen literally thought that the fall was movement away from stasis into change and then down into this reality. That's not what the fall is. Losky says, this would be the eternity of the intelligible world of Plato, not that of the living God. If God lives in eternity, this living eternity must surpass the opposition of mobility of time and the immobility of eternity. Maximus emphasizes that the eternity of the intelligible world, the noetic realm, is a created eternity. Propositions, universal truths, the immutable structure of the cosmos, the geometry of ideas that govern creation, the networks of mathematical essences, are the aeon or the aeonic eternity that began as time. Hence its name, for it takes its name from the beginning, the age, in aeon, by passing from non-being into being. But that remains without change, submitted to a non-temporal existence. This aeonic eternity is stable, immutable. It is the one that gives coherence to the intelligible world and to the intelligibility of this world. Sensory and intelligible, time and the aeon cling one to another, for since both have a beginning, they are commensurable. The aeon is immobile time. Time is the moving aeon. That's direct from Maximus. Only their coexistence and their interpenetration can make time thinkable. The aeon is, in a narrow sense, in connection with the angelic world. This is everything I've been telling you. Angels and human beings both partake of time and the aeon, but in a different manner. While the human condition is temporal, but in a time rendered intelligible by the aeon, the angels knew the free choice of time only at the moment of their creation, when they were tested, and they had a type of instantaneous temporality from which they left when they fell for an aeon of praise and service to God, or else revolt and hatred and fall. However, a process exists in the aeon, for the angelic nature cannot ceaselessly increase in acquiring eternal benefits, but without temporal succession. In other words, angels can learn new things, they can increase in grace, but it is not through a temporal succession. It is a different type of movement and change. Thus, angels appear as intelligible universes that take part in the organizing function of the aeonic eternity. Yes, thank you. As for God's eternity, the divine eternity, it cannot be defined either by the change proper to time or by the immutability proper to the aeon. God's eternity as an energy transcends both, he is arguing. He doesn't say it's an energy, but it is. All the predicates of God are energies. When we speak of what God has, right? I'm not saying the persons are energies. I'm just saying that when we speak of God's attributes, powers, actions, predicates, they're in that sense, they're energies. The love of God, the foreknowledge of God, the being of God, the simplicity of God, the unity of God are all energies. That's basic Palamos. The necessary recourse to apophasis, apophatic theology, forbids us from thinking that the living God is subject to, forbids us from thinking of the living God according to the eternity of the mathematical laws. So you see, there is a higher realm. It is the location, you could say, of the mathematical laws, the higher principles, the geometric forms. What does he list? The angelic noetic powers, propositional truths, these kinds of things, geometry, ideas. That is still a created reality. This is why St. Maximus says that universals are created. Okay. Platonism says universals are the one. Thus, Orthodox theology does not allow or know of any uncreated intelligible, right? Because God transcends those things. Otherwise, corporeality, which is created, would appear as a relative evil, right? Bodily existence would be contrasted, like in Platonism, to the eternal. We don't say that. Right? Bodily existence is not bad. Time is not bad. The uncreated, therefore, surpasses any dyadic opposition, namely those of the intelligible and of the sensory, and of the temporal and of the eternal. And the problem of time leads us back to nothingness, from which the divine will raises us, to make an other than God, us, enter into eternity. That is through deification. Now that chapter goes on to talk about the angelic spheres and the aeon. I'm not going to read all that, but very excellent chapter, just summarizing the basic Orthodox conceptions from St. Maximus, John Damascus, Palamos, right, on what creation is in Genesis 1 in Orthodox theology. All right, so let's get back to this. Where were we at? By the way, welcome everybody. We got 300 people. I'll read a couple super chats while we are taking a break from that heavy discourse there. By the way, in case you're wondering, the logi in the divine mind are the patterns and principles and archetypes and bases, not just for the created things in this realm, but for the aeon as well, right? So for anything that exists in the aeon, an angel, right? There's a uncreated logi in the mind of God that is the pattern for that. So don't make the mistake of thinking that the logi are the essences of creatures. They're not. The essences of creatures are in the creatures. But every creature, every one, every many, every particular, every universal is patterned on its unique logi. The many logi are one in the logos, and the many logos are one, or the one logos is many in his logi. Right? And they are really distinct from one another, or else there would not be real distinctions in the world. There are an infinity of logi, and Maximus says that they are one and they are many. That's basic Palamos. And every modern Orthodox Palamite theologian says that. Now that we are back to the movie, I was going to do the super chats. Melissa DeCourcy, $20, and that was the last stream that we did. She threw one in at the end of the show, and I missed it. Thank you, Melissa. Much appreciated. I said be by 888. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I said bye. Ephraim, $10. It's a bunch of eyes. Ephraim says, thank you for your hard work this year. Thank you, Ephraim. Much appreciated. Thank you for your hard work. Janie Sophia, $25. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's to you and Jamie. Thank you for another full year of great content. Well, we hope so. Right? Lord willing, we will continue to do this, and hopefully we can hit 70 and then 75,000 pretty soon. Thank you, Janie Sophia. Much appreciated. That was a nice fat super chat. Warhammer Dwarfs, right? Gimli himself has tweeted us, and he says, vibrations, the Cheetah Uri and 5 cents reality. Vibrational 5 cents reality. Yes, exactly. You had in my mind the Cheetah Uri and David Icke. Jeanette Mich, $25. She didn't say anything. She is doing the non-being empty tweet, the empty super chat, empty man chat of just, and that's what she says. And I say yes. I say yes to your non-yes. Countess Powers for $10. She says, keep on doing what you're doing. It is always a pleasure. Amen. Thank you. We will. Schwan Chavez, $20. Whew. You guys are being super generous. Thank you so much. Big ups to Jay for all the great content this year. Yes, we did have a great year, didn't we? A lot of cool content in 2020. Should we reflect on the year? 2020 was a weird, bittersweet year, wasn't it? I mean, we saw a lot of growth to the channel, to the membership. We saw a lot of growth in the crypto sphere. I mean, a lot of good things this year, as well as a lot of just nonsense, craziness with Karanka. So, good and bad. Hope everybody didn't have a totally terrible 2020. I know for a lot of people it was difficult. Especially people who kind of work like the 9-to-5s, the people that have the, real world businesses, right? Not internet businesses. Like, I think it was probably hard for those people. We sympathize with you guys, definitely. I pray that this nonsense gets better. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of end to the nonsense anytime soon, but if you had an online business, then 2020 ironically was a good year for you. So much love to all you guys. You guys keep us in business, and let's just hope. I don't know. Let's just pray. Lord, help us 2021. Please help us this nonsense to go away. B Mang, $50. Woo! Wow. Man, you guys are showing a lot of love. Much appreciated. B Mang for $50 says, thank you for all your work, Jay. Thank you, B Mang. $50. I mean, that makes this whole stream worth it. Now, everybody super chats make it worth it, but that's a fat one, dude. Wow. I'm very honored. Real Cooter Brown, $8.99. This has been a fascinating lecture. Happy New Year to you and Jamie. Thank you. We have been going for a little over an hour. We need to wrap it up pretty quick. I'm going to finish the movie and then we'll get into the book, the first couple chapters. But thank you for that, Real Cooter Brown. Shout out to you. Shout out to Big Man for that fat super chat. Much love. Vitalik Buterin, $3. Happy New Year's. Why does Klaus Schwab dress like a Mortal Kombat character? Because he sees himself as a Mortal Kombat. Who are you kids? Right. Finish him. Because he sees himself as that. That's why. He's engaged in mortal social engineering combat. Dino Debo, $10. Thank you for your Christian content. Jesus is the truth. Yes, he is. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to God but through me, John 14:6. Absolutely. Welcome. We got 200. We had 300 nerds tonight. That's pretty good. I know a lot of people could be doing other stuff tonight. That's cool. But let's finish up with Empty Man, and then we'll get to the book. So basically, after the cult compound scene, the cult begins to chase him. And we start to figure out, by the way, that he found a file, like a file cabinet. And he realized that the cult, shocker, knows about him and has for a long time. In fact, they know everything about him. And it's almost perhaps like they have been leading this dude, right, along the golden cult path. Now, this is reminiscent of, Eyes Wide Shut. We've seen this in many of these kinds of movies. The Magus, right? The cult knew all along, and they have, engineered your life to bring you to this point, to initiate you. And that is where the movie thinks we think that's where the movie's taking us, right? At this point, we think, he was the chosen boy of the cult the whole time. And yes, that's kind of true. However, turns out we have been duped. We have been shamalama ding donged. We've been shamalaned. How did we get shamalaned? This dude is not just a mind control cult creation. This dude is a metaphysical creation. He is the Tulpa. He's the Dougie. Exactly. Turns out, after this cult compound sequence, he goes back to find the teenage dude that was in the cult, kidnaps the guy, takes him outside the city, bops him in the face a good couple whops and says, "What is going on? Tell me right now, or I'm going to bop your face some more." This maniacal teenage dude is like, "He's in your head. It's all coming true. He's got you. He is the one who will bring total end and destruction. He will bring the end of all things. He will," it's like he does all this doomsday type stuff. Antichrist level stuff, right? This is the figure who's coming from the beyond. He will destroy all, and he will inhabit you. Right? He says, you are the tulpa that the cult created, the thought form to inhabit the body for the entity to inhabit. Who is the entity? He is the evil one. He is the angel of death, the bringer of non-existence, destruction, non-being. I don't think the movie is intentionally telling us that it's about the Antichrist. I think the movie is unintentionally telling us basically this is a kind of like occult version story of an Antichrist mythos that this poor dude, right, doesn't know that he's not even a real dude. And now we learn why the first sequence with him was his birthday. That was his creation day. He was created that day by the cult who, through seance and meditation, manifested this dude into being. And so he's just a collection of a bunch of people's ideas. This is the basis. This makes sense in that Far Eastern worldview where you manifest what's real through, right, out of non-being into being through intentional concentration. And she has some weird line that, the bowl cut girl where she says, flesh is thought plus time plus intentional concentration or some nonsense like this, right? So we find out that, remember when the cult was doing the seance and they summoned somebody and the guy was watching from the background. It was him. He was the one they summoned, you see. So our main dude, unfortunately, is the tulpa. It is also, I think, perhaps an analogy for mind control. Right? So these cults that we think are, they're just meditation. They're just, love. And once again, no, we find out that at the heart of the hippie dream is a dark presence, a demonic presence. The same demonic entity at the heart of these Far Eastern religions that are intent on self-destruction. Yes. Who is that entity? Who is that being? Well, I wonder. It just happens to be always associated with death, invoking death, destruction, chaos, the serpent spirit. I wonder who that is. Who might the serpent spirit be? I wonder. It's anything but Satan, right? Believe anything but what the Bible says. You see, that's how it's spun, right? We want Antichrist, we want end times, we want Babylon working. Just don't give me Jesus, right? Give me all that evil stuff. But wait a minute, I thought there is no Satan. But it just happens to be an angel of non-being and death, who is in Leary's book, The Serpent Force. I mean, dude, come on. How is this not obvious? Do you even need that much discernment to tell? Like, all these ancient religions worship a snake? There's this funny section in the Leary book, too, where he says, when the process of initiation begins and you begin to have a fever and vomit and feel like you're melting and dying, just go with it and enjoy it. So he says, you're going to feel like you're experiencing hell and schizophrenia. Just enjoy it, he says. Okay. So there is, I think, an analogy here for mind control, for how cults have perfected the science of mind control, MK Ultra. We all know we've done countless streams on that. I'm not going to rehearse all that. But as you know, yes, with L. Ron Hubbard, you have the direct connection to Crowley. Studied with Crowley, OTO stuff for many, many years. Then Scientology, right? So that's the rough outline of what we're talking about here. You find all the same exotheology in the other stupid cults, Heaven's Gate, this kind of stuff. It's not by accident that they all come up with the same exotheology gibberish. So, as our guy has his full revelation that he is the unfortunate creation of the cult, he is their tulpa, the girl explains, well, I'm sorry, dude, but we had to create a body for him, for our demon overlord, because he's too much for the human bodies that he inhabits. So it's literal possession. And they say that he just kind of like destroys the humans that he inhabits, within a few years. And so rather than our demon lord having to wait another 100 years to find a suitable body to possess of a human, we have just created a tulpa for him to inhabit. And that is you, by the way. So sucks to be that dude. Sucks to be Dougie, right? Then we see, as he figures all this out, the moment of self-revelation, the dark one, the entity, the non-being being steps through the portal, presents himself as basically a big garbage bag of vomit, vomits out of the garbage bag into the dude. And the dude sucks up the entire garbage juice smoothie, all of it. And his eyes go black. Typical. He's possessed. The entity, the empty man, now fills that dude because that dude is the empty man, you see. And in a way, you could see this as kind of like the analogy for what Satan does want to accomplish, right? It's not that he just wants to have an antichrist figure at the end of the world to inhabit and possess. It's that Satan wants to destroy man and for man to become an empty vessel for the power and spirit of Satan to possess. Right? Paul says that those who don't believe the gospel, the God of this world has blinded their minds, he says. He says that Satan can appear as an angel of light to deceive people. That is the light, the dark light, the black light, the black sun, that is Satan, that is Lucifer. That's who fools these people, especially the guru people and the people who have the hallucinogenic trips that go into the darkness, they avoid the abyss, and they see the light in the abyss. That's not God. Now, God could come to you and save you out of those experiences, but he also may not save you. Right? You may literally be opening yourself up to evil entities who then begin to oppress you, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that everybody who's done LSD is possessed by Satan, okay? But you are opening the doorway to your psyche to be possessed, is what I'm trying to say. You are becoming an empty man and opening that gateway. And that's particularly why we don't advocate for people recreationally doing these things, you see. That's my view on this. I do not advocate that you ever do these things, and especially not recreationally. Now, could there be a case where, I don't know, like a dude has ruined his life, let's say, as an alcoholic? Let's say somebody is like totally just, they're on their deathbed. Could there be a situation where the administration of ecstasy could help them? Perhaps. I mean, maybe might as well. Okay. But I mean, outside of these like extreme cases, no, I do not think people should do hallucinogens at all. I think they're totally dangerous. I think they are not the path to enlightenment at all. And they, again, open you up to staring into the abyss and something stepping in. And by the way, you can still be deluded without being possessed, right? You might not even realize that when you have the solve the world moment at the beginning of the trip, that could be a demonic influence, you see. Because you think, oh, bro, I'm so enlightened now. Like, I understand the world, right? And this is usually the pride and the arrogance of everybody who has the acid trip thinks that they've solved the world. And all you're doing is repeating and rehashing ancient monism and Hinduism, right? You're not saying anything new, dummy. It's what every freaking pagan religion has said for millennia. And you think, oh, I've solved the freaking world, dude. Go talk to any of these people. They're all the exact same, right? Go all the deadheads. They're all the exact same. They all think this. They think that have achieved this like supreme level of enlightenment, and they don't even, too stupid to even know that they're rehashing ancient animism and paganism. But I mean, just read Terence McKenna. Even he says it's just rehashing ancient paganism. You're not saying anything new. Shut up. You're an idiot. Shut your mouth. Anyway, but we covered all that in the talk with COTEL last time. Maybe I'll try to remember to link that. Anyway, so basically that's the end of the movie. Unfortunately, our protagonist doesn't get out of this dilemma. We see a bunch of sequences that show how he was kind of dreamt up and created as a piecemeal of different people and different memories. Yeah, that's all my notes. And then, especially in these final sequences, we see quite a few homages to David Lynch. We see the record spinning, stuck in this endless cycle. We see Lost Highway imagery of driving down the dark road. We see the blurring, kind of distortion. I think we even see fans spinning. I don't remember, but a lot of Lynchian imagery here. This is based on a comic book. The cover of the comic book literally has like the Twin Peaks mountains flipped upside down. So tulpas. I mean, it's all very, very Lynchian. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. He's not credited, but it wouldn't surprise me if David Lynch didn't have some kind of maybe consultation or production role that he didn't want credited. I don't know. But if not, it still is very, very Lynchian. Is it a great movie? I wouldn't say it's a great movie. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's creepy in certain ways. And, like Twin Peaks or Lost Highway, it has insights into some of the, darker side of the spiritual realm. So in that regard, I would say it's worth watching. A couple more super chats. Barry Lurd. Have you heard you years and years ago on Our Big Dumb Mouth? Yes, good guys. Remember that OBDM podcast years ago. And by the way, we were talking about hallucinogens on OBDM 3 or 4 years ago. He says, I followed you since. You always produce or link to the most edifying content. Well, thank you very much, Barry Lurd. And I do think I remember your handle in the past with various super chats. Much appreciated. What's up, General Neo? Longtime follower, supporter as well. For $13, she says, have you heard the theory of the 13th tribe? That it was the tribe of Dan, and they migrated north and became Vikings. Yeah, I've heard a lot of these theories. I mean, I've heard of the lost tribes, and I've heard that the 13th tribe is the Scottish people, and there's all these kinds of theories. I don't know. Probably something is true, but I don't know. But yes, I have heard that. Who knows? Autistic, but perhaps there could be something related to the red hair and the red beard, right? I mean, we're told that David was ruddy of appearance, red hair. I don't know. Autistic Spectrum Warrior, $10. Thank you for your work. Thank you. By the way, I think you DM'd me and I forgot to reply. But so, by the way, if people DM me and message me, I'm not like saying I'm the biggest e-celeb or anything like that. I'm probably the coolest, definitely the hottest. I mean, in terms of e-celebs, I am at least a diva, like a B+ level diva. And even if you're a C level diva, you get a lot of messages. Okay, I'm just trying to say like I'm really popular right now, so I get a lot of tweets and DMs, so I can't keep up with everybody's DMs. This is one of the things that an e-celeb suffers through, and I think a lot of the lesser people don't understand that. That's just a joke, by the way. I'm just joking. We're still very butthurt about the fact that Little AIDS has a blue check, right? He has existence. I just hit 20,000 on Twitter, and I don't have a blue check, so I don't really exist. I'm kind of like empty man. I'm like halfway, right? But I'm halfway from the bridge of empty man to existence. So I'm half empty man. The glass is half empty man. All right, so briefly we'll get into the first couple chapters, and if you want to see the full analysis of this wild and crazy book, you will have to subscribe to Jay's Analysis. The link is in the description of the show, and it will be out not today. Takes me a few days to do this. It'll be the next few days before part 2 is up to the subscribers. So this begins with what you could imagine from, again, I'm not knocking Daniel Pinchbeck on a personal level. I don't know this guy. Obviously, I have a radically different worldview from this person, but he does have a couple insights in the introduction that he says, for example, the 60s countercultural revolution has radically transformed society. Exactly. He is perceptive enough to note that. He mentions some of the bizarre characters like Ram Dass that we covered with COTEL. He says we got to look to key figures like Aldous Huxley, Ken Kesey, Ram Dass. These guys, again, many of them connected to Esalen Institute, which we know was an elite-funded thing. He says the 60s, if you really want to understand it, he says it's a return of shamanism. All right? We want to have an archaic revival, a primeval revival, the primal revival. Primalism. Somehow, for some reason, we're supposed to think that shamanism was better than modern world. Now, maybe that's the case. I don't think it's the case, but why? Right. So, in other words, a lot of times the way dialectics works, or the way people are convinced by false dialectics, is that they think, well, the present system has this wrong with it, right? Which is probably true, right? So because a lot of the critiques that, for example, the 60s counterculture people made, some of the, well, I don't want to say a lot, but many of those critiques, you could say, were valid critiques. Are we too materialistic? Yes. Are we too focused on the here and the now and attachment to pleasures? Yes, sure. Okay. And then what happens is that they give you a false solution. Right. So if that's the case, then they'll say, here's the bait and switch. Oh, you see, so now you must return to ancient paganism and shamanism. Right. Oh, West bad, Far Eastern religion's good. You see the bait and switch? But it doesn't follow from that. Right. It's a non sequitur to say, well, if this was bad, then its opposite must therefore be good. Again, basic dialectics. You can have two wrong positions. You ever thought about that? Like maybe both of these are wrong, right? Think about geopolitics, right? Everybody always wants to, simple-minded people want geopolitics to be boiled down to good guy, bad guy. Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe it's two bad guys? Hello? You ever watched a mafia movie? So we have to get beyond, this simplistic kind of ignorant thinking. And that's very difficult, when we're dealing with sort of the new agey, the counterculture, wook, the woke wook, because they typically are pretty simplistic in their thinking. Now, one thing he says that is true is that the dominance of scientism and the scientific method and empiricism is empty. Yes, exactly. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to jump back into rolling around in dung paganism, right? That's not the solution. The fact that Neil deGrasse Tyson is goofy is not going to propel me to rolling around in dung in India, okay? That's not the solution, right? It's not Neil deGrasse Tyson or poo, right? That's not your two options. False dialectic. And I noted in my analysis of Pinchbeck here, have you ever considered that maybe both of these options are problematic? Right? And so then he launches into, let's talk about ancient Mayan civilization in Tibet. Really? Ancient? Like, why is ancient Mayan civilization somehow higher on this totem pole of spirituality? I mean, they sacrificed human beings by the 10,000s on the high holy days. So, I mean, come on, dude. He goes on to talk about the 1960s as a shamanic initiation as a whole. That's what I've said for many, many years. And by the way, around the time that I was really beginning to learn that is when Daniel Pinchbeck wrote this. So that's true. I would say he is correct in that analysis. The 1960s were an intentional shamanic initiation of the West. Fritjof Capra, right? We read Capra's globalist book. That's what he says. It's not... It's dust in here, by the way. That's why I'm scratching my nose. I'm not snorting cocaine, as you can see. These books are dusty. Let's see. He goes on to talk about the explosion of the whole drug culture. He talks about John Lennon, the influence of John Lennon, John Lennon's influences. He talks about the UN basically sort of adopting this model of counterculture globally. The natural drugs versus big pharma. There's some truth to this section too, by the way, where he says we can critique big pharma. But by the way, I'm sorry, big pharma was involved in the production of LSD. So, I mean, even that doesn't really, even that narrative breaks down. And if you remember, Terence McKenna did make a couple points about this too, about the dangers of big pharma and TV, right? And I would agree. Is TV bad and toxic? Yes. Is big pharma bad? Yes. And so these guys are right about that. But see, they give you the wrong solution. Oh, so because that's bad, now you need to do DMT and LSD. LSD comes from these same people. What are you talking about? He then does the same thing of, because Western religion is scientism and this and that and problematic and bad, let's jump to animism, pantheism, mythological archetypes. The return of Quetzalcoatl. Excuse me, but Quetzalcoatl is who they sacrificed humans to. So, no, that's not where I want to go. Next chapter is about the work itself, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The idea of being liberated from death. The book is supposed to be for the guru, and it's the guru's guide for guiding the guy dying. Okay. So this is supposed to be a guide. This introductory chapter, the Beyond Pinchbeck, the next chapter, which I guess is Tim Leary. Is it Leary? I forget who wrote this chapter. It doesn't say, but I'm assuming it's now beginning the Tim Leary section. Leary says, Carl Jung. Carl Jung is who we want to look to here. Carl Jung's psychoanalysis, which borrowed from ancient Gnosticism and Platonism, was aiming for a dialectic, or a way to get beyond dialectics. Carl Jung argues that the way that we get beyond dialectics is to integrate these disparate so-called forces, the shade, right, the anima and the animus and the anima, right? So you got to integrate that, and then you will transcend like the division and separation and multiplicity and the different aspects of yourself. And so apparently Jung thought that this book was relevant for that. Because what we're going to see is that there's not actual evil out there in these entities, beings, thought forms. They're manifestations of your psyche. But the weird part about this was that there was an interesting statement here about metaphysics, where Carl Jung seems to say the problem with Western philosophy and theology is that it's either or. It wants to fit everything into a dialectical opposition of either or. He's correct on that. And he probably knew that because of Platonism. I mean, this is really fundamental Hellenism is, right, there's a either or of eternity good, time bad. One good, many bad, right? Being good, non-being bad. And chain of being. So these dialectics are problematic. And Carl Jung says that when we say God is this, we have a problem because we've left via negativa and apophatic theology, and we've given a definitional simplicity that's problematic. That's true. However, we're not going to say the opposite extreme of the Far Eastern philosophers, which is that therefore God is so apophatic that nobody can know anything about him. He is not a him. It's a ultimate beyond being, apeiron, unknowable, that can never have an interaction or a relation with creatures and could never become incarnate. Now, we would say as Orthodox, yes, the essence of God is apeiron. It is beyond being. But God's energies come down to us. So, we would agree with Carl Jung's critique of Western doctrines of defining who God is, especially from the Middle Ages on, but we do not accept his Far Eastern answer that God in every sense is unknowable and apophatic. That would lead us to atheism. Carl Jung goes on to talk about the way that the guru is to initiate the person underneath him to understand the ego death. So the death of the self, the ego death, is part of this integration process whereby man accepts and becomes the dead man. And by accepting and becoming the dead man, he can bypass and not be duped by the thought forms and the conid state, the thought forms that appear to him, the fantasies that take on reality, the terrifying dreams evoked by his karma that play out in the unconscious experience in the initiation. In other words, when you begin this process of going through the trip, the journey, the shamanic journey, the journey of the dead, they're likening the journey of the soul in the Tibetan Book of the Dead to the LSD experience. And if you have a bad trip, that's what it will feel like. It will feel like hell. Okay. And he's saying that you need a guide there because it's so intense and so wild. Okay. So when the person is going through this, the shaman wants to guide them, the bardo, right, in this experience, wants to guide the person to not be duped by the phantasms and the thought forms that are going to appear, which, by the way, just seem to be like demons, right? Just like the clockwork elves seem to be like demons. Just embrace them, dude. That's basically what we're saying here. Okay, so don't be scared and just let them into you. That's basically what we have. And in doing so, you will achieve liberation. Now, here's where some of the things I had to kind of laugh at here with Leary, because Leary says, when you do this, you're going to feel like you're going schizophrenic. You're going to feel like you're sick and nauseous, but just go with it. Right? It's like maybe I'm feeling schizophrenic because the drug state is inducing schizophrenia. I mean, Aldous Huxley says in his writings that it does induce schizophrenia. So maybe that's something that a person should be weary of, right? He says, no, don't worry about that. It's a birth, death, rebirth rite. And every religion that did Tantra, the Vedic sages, the Eleusinian initiates, they all understood that it's connected to the wheel of time and being reborn. Now, here's a funny statement. Ancient racial memories will come back. I'm not sure that fits with the social construct view for ancient racial memories to come back. Oh, wait a minute, no. But you better revise that quickly out of what Tim Leary wrote here, because that doesn't conform to what modern critical race theory says. So then we get to this first initiatory state. So the first state is what they call the ego loss, non-game ecstasy, the first bardo of the trip, or the Book of the Dead. This is the first step on the secret pathway to illumination. It will deal with understanding the game. Life is a karmic game. It will be your awakening. The sleeper must awaken. I was watching this and it just kept reminding me of Dune. And there's actually a line here that's very similar to what Agent Cooper says to Leland. Remember when Leland's dying in season 2 of Twin Peaks? And Agent Cooper reads this line about perceiving the light or something like that. It's literally almost exactly what Cooper says. Anyway, so you're going to experience a light, he says. This light is the light of reality. It is the energetic transformation of thought forms. It is the realm of the potentia. It is the unformed, the unmade. It is the divine mind of the Buddha. It is Buddhahood. It is perfect enlightenment. It is the beyond. So the unmade, unformed that you're going into here, this light experience, and by the way, I've experienced this. This is real. He says is, quote, God or the creator God. It is not. I will tell you that. This is the either created light that is being experienced in the next spiritual realm up, the next dimension up, the noetic realm, or it is a demon. And demons can appear as light. So whether it's a demon or whether it's just created light, right, doesn't really matter because it's not God. And Leary is very clear that that's what all the religions are calling God. Okay? That's what Leary says. Now, what we just read from Lasky, we don't call that God. Right? God is uncreated light. Right? John says that in John 1. John says that in 1 John 1, right? The transfiguration shows God as uncreated light. Paul says this in 1 Timothy 6. So we have to be careful not to confuse the noetic realm and the experience in the noetic realm with God himself. And that's precisely what Leary does here. Leary goes on in the notes to say that this experience he thinks is analogous to the birth of the universe. So just as the universe was this compacted thing in this stupid mythology that blew up into everything that is, the individual must return to this pure state of non-being. Okay, but why? Like, why is going back to being a little tiny atom which is basically non-being? He's saying, why is that better? Well, there's no reason to say that that's better. First of all, it's not true. This explosion from nothing into being mythology, that's the secular creation myth. But even if it were true, on what basis is that something that we got to work back to? Why am I supposed to think that it's better, right? Because remember that this is making the argument that somehow older is better. Oh, I follow the world's most ancient mystic religions, bro. You follow modern Western Christian man's religion, but my religion, like, it goes back 1 billion years, dude. Really? Maybe your error is 1 billion years old, right? I mean, I don't think it was 1 billion years old, but even if it was 1 billion years old, so what? Like, on what basis is just being older better? Maybe you were the tards of 1 billion years ago. You ever think of that? But no, Leary just assumes, and his idiotic audience assumes, that if it's older, it's better. Well, Satan's older than any of us, and he was in the garden, right? So just because it's older doesn't mean it's better. But the assumption here is that since everything came from no thing, maybe it's better to return to no thing. You see the dumb logic here? This is how stupid it is. And so therefore, there is a sense in which you could say that these religions are worshiping nothing. The great zero in the sky. Whoa. Here comes the soy-faced meme guy. Whoa, dude. We worship zero. I worship the great zero. The zero almighty. And by the way, another problem that's at work here is that there's an inability to make distinctions. Okay, so in a philosophical, metaphysical sense, right? And we will give the Greeks credit for this because Greek philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, Plotinus, they were good, and the church fathers even better at making distinctions and making distinctions without it necessitating composition, division, or separation, right? For example, henosis from Cyril, right? Or the interpenetration of the two natures in Christ amongst one another without either of them losing their natural properties. You know, these are examples, right? The distinctions of the persons in the Trinity without there being parts in the Trinity, okay? These are examples of how philosophy and the church fathers were able to utilize ideas of distinction without separation, composition, or division. But in all these religions and philosophies, distinction is automatically seen and perceived to be lesser, bad, or the source of evil in general. Hence why the ability to even say you are a self is itself egoism. You need to stop being a self, bro. Because when you say you're a self, you set yourself apart from everybody else, dude. And that is douchey. You're such a douche when you say that you're a self. Oh, really? And then the guy who says that thinks he's superior to you, like, because he is a dude who's a self making this argument. It's just stupid, right? All of this stuff is childish and stupid. But because at root, underneath all of this, there is a satanic component, you can deduce truths out of this. You can see, I see the satanic deception involved in this. And then, by the way, we get another. This is where Leary makes the funny statement on page 26 that yes, when you feel like you are melting and becoming schizo, and your pelvic regions begin to gyrate, and you feel like you're being attacked by demons, and you have a fever and nausea, just enjoy it. Literally, that's what he says. He says, just enjoy it, dude. Like, dude, I feel like I'm dying. Man, just enjoy it, man. It's cool. It's all good. So then he goes on and he says, the light that you see here is God, or what we call God. It's not God, but that's what Leary says. He says, if you don't maintain this heightened state of experiencing this light, he says, you will slip into the next lower phase of this initiatic process that he calls the secondary clear light. He says, so after you've gone through the ego loss experience, which is seeing this created light, what he's calling it, after you meet Satan, I'm just going to say what it is. Okay, once you meet Satan and you experience ego loss, which is not ego loss, it's basically being initiated into Satanism, which makes you feel like you're superior to everyone, and that's why everybody who goes through this comes out of it thinking they've solved the world. He says the next phase that you will probably slip into is the enlightenment about biological energy. So you're going to feel a explosion of creative impulse and understanding of the biological realm, right? The energy of the animals and the trees and nature and molecules and plants, and how energy is suffusing all of this. Now that's true, but again, that's all created energy. Okay, so don't mistake this from what orthodoxy says, because orthodoxy says, yeah, there's vegetative energy, and there's vegetative, there's created light from the sun, and there's human being energy, and there's biological energy. Yeah, that's all true, but that's still created energy. Okay, that's not God. It's a distinction between God and creatures. God's uncreated, creatures are created. Okay, fundamental metaphysics of Christianity there. The pagan religions, blend them. Remember, everybody's doing this. So they blend it, and they say God is the created world. God is the created light. God is the created energies. God is the plants, bro. If you have slipped down into this lower stage, this level 2 of the trip journey, he says you will begin to feel something strange going on in your body. He says you're going to experience the Kundalini energy that will either, you'll feel it at the base of your spine or at the top of your head. The tingling, hot heat. This is the presence of Satan in your body, making you feel like you are enlightened. That's what this is. And by the way, for all of the goofy people who say that this teaching of St. Gregory Palamas is yoga, this is nothing. This is totally different, you see, right? Everything Palamas says is nothing like yoga, okay? Now, the phrase of, seeing the light is similar, yes. But St. Gregory Palamas says it is not the created light that we are seeing. We are not being suffused with demons and serpent energy in our spine and on our pelvic regions. Okay, nothing like that in Palamas, okay? St. Gregory Palamas says the goal of this prayer process is to become one with a personal God, Jesus. And the Spirit leads us to Jesus, who leads us to the Father. So it's Trinitarian. Nothing like that here. It's just this. So in other words, because the same word light is used, do you think it's the same? How stupid is that? Because Palamas used the word light, and because they say that the serpent power, by that argument, Paul is talking about Satanism because he says the word light. But no, he says that a demon can appear as an angel of light, and God also appears as light. So duh, it shouldn't even be debated. It's just stupid. So we will stop there because that's the beginning of the next stage of the trip, is these first 2 phases of the first bardo. The second bardo will begin with the manifestations of the thought forms and the hallucinations. Right? This is where we're going to start seeing the dang demons. Okay, and that's going to be taken up in the show. The part 2 of the show for the subscribers to Jay's Analysis, which you can subscribe at the link below at the members site. And we will do these last couple super chats, and then we will wish you all a happy New Year's. Bert says, for $10, great discussion, Jay. Happy New Year. Great discussion with all of you here with me, and thank you so much for your support. Rybranium for $5. Happy New Year. I don't know what voice that is. It sounds like one of Santazel's. I don't know who it is, but we'll just say that it is. General Nao, $7. Another psychedelic guru. We would love to see you. Oh yes, I keep forgetting. I have read. I've read Cosmic Trigger, and I've read the other one. I've not read the whole Illuminatus trilogy. I've started it. It's really long, so I didn't really dive into it yet. I do intend to eventually read the Illuminatus trilogy. And yes, I don't know why I keep forgetting Raw, but Robert Anton Wilson was very influenced by Crowley and all that stuff. And so, what's the Luciferian? There's Cosmic Trigger, and then there's one that's like Luciferian. So I read all of those, or both of those, in 2010 or 11. So I have read those, but they would be perfect. You're absolutely right. One of Santa's Clockwork Machine elves. Happy New Year. What's the other Raw book? Somebody will remember. There's Cosmic Trigger, and then there's the one that's like the Luciferian something. Anyway. All right. Awesome. Happy New Year. Thank you guys. A lot of fun. Empty Man, yeah, it's worth watching. I already spoiled it for you, but you could have fun, kind of decoding the symbolism and see if you agree with what all I say in my take. And if you don't, feel free to leave a comment below. Hit like, share, subscribe, and we will see you soon. Next up is X-Files. We have the X-Files show, Prometheus Rising. That's it. Prometheus Rising. Thank you. We'll have the X-Files show in the next couple days. That'll be fun. We will be doing our favorite episodes. Probably, I said top 10, but it's actually more like 15. And the movie, the first movie. Okay, second X-Files movie is awful. Terrible. But Fight the Future is pretty good. There's some really weird stuff